A compassionate waiter risks his job to feed a homeless woman who had been sitting outside his workplace for days. Fired on the spot for his kindness, he's left shattered until a mysterious black SUV pulls up, turning his life upside down in ways he never imagined. The morning was brisk, with the sun barely warming the frosty air, and downtown was just beginning to stir. Cars passed in a steady stream, their drivers oblivious to the small restaurant on the corner of Main Street. Inside, the soft hum of conversation blended with the clatter of dishes and the sizzling sounds of a busy kitchen. It was a typical day for Aaron, a young waiter with dreams far bigger than the confines of the restaurant walls. As Aaron wiped down a table near the window, he glanced outside and noticed a figure sitting on the cold pavement. The woman looked frail, her clothes tattered and worn, and her shoulders hunched as if trying to ward off the chill. She clutched an old thin blanket around her, and her gaze fixed longingly on the plates of steaming food being carried to the tables inside. Aaron's heart sank. She looked as though she hadn't eaten in days. Aaron stood frozen for a moment, torn between his duties and the aching sense of compassion gnawing at him. He had seen her sitting there before, but had always hesitated, fearing the wrath of his boss, Mr. Grayson, who ran the restaurant with an iron fist. Grayson was known for his strict policies and intolerance for anything, or anyone, that didn't align with his vision of a pristine establishment. But today was different. There was something in the woman's eyes, a silent plea that Aaron couldn't ignore. As he cleared another table, his thoughts raced. He remembered his own struggles, the nights he'd gone to bed hungry, and the times he'd relied on the kindness of strangers. How could he turn away now? The decision weighed on him heavily, but deep down he knew what he had to do. Aaron moved swiftly, grabbing a clean plate and heading to the kitchen. His hands trembled as he loaded it with food. Scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, and a side of hash browns. He added a cup of coffee, steaming and rich, hoping it would bring her some warmth. He carried the plate toward the door, his pulse quickening with every step. As he approached the woman, she looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. "Here," Aaron said softly, kneeling to place the plate in front of her. "You look like you could use a warm meal." The woman's hands trembled as she accepted the plate. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse and barely audible. She took a small bite, her eyes glistening with tears. Aaron felt a lump in his throat as he watched her savor each bite as if it were a feast. But inside the restaurant, a shadow loomed. Mr. Grayson stood at the window, his arms crossed, his expression darkening by the second. And in that moment, Aaron's act of kindness set into motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. Aaron had always been the kind of person who felt deeply for others, a quality instilled in him by his late father, a man known for his generosity despite having little to give. Growing up, Aaron's family had lived paycheck to paycheck. His father worked long hours at a factory, while his mother juggled multiple jobs to keep food on the table. Aaron learned early on the value of hard work and the importance of compassion. When Aaron was just 16, tragedy struck. His father suffered a fatal accident at the factory, leaving the family not only grief-stricken but also financially shattered. Aaron took on part-time jobs wherever he could find them, mowing lawns, stocking shelves, even cleaning offices late at night. He had to drop out of college after just one semester. The tuition was a luxury his family simply couldn't afford. Now, in his early 20s, Aaron worked at Grayson's Diner, a modest restaurant tucked away in the bustling downtown area. The pay was meager, and the hours were grueling, but it was steady work. Aaron took pride in doing his job well, even under Mr. Grayson's unyielding scrutiny. The man had a reputation for being a perfectionist, running the diner with the precision of a drill sergeant. Aaron learned quickly that stepping out of line, no matter how small the infraction, could have severe consequences. Aaron had big dreams, though they felt impossibly distant. He dreamed of opening his own cafe, a warm and welcoming place where people could gather, laugh, and feel at home. He even kept a small notebook in his apron pocket, where he sketched out ideas for menus, layouts, and the kind of ambiance he wanted to create. But dreams like that required money, connections, and opportunities, things that always seemed just out of Aaron's reach. Despite his hardships, Aaron refused to let the weight of his struggles harden him. He often stayed late to help his coworkers clean up, knowing many of them were just as overworked and underpaid as he was. He'd bring home leftovers from the diner to share with his mother, who was still recovering from years of exhausting work. Aaron wasn't just working for himself. He was working for his family, for a better future. Yet, no matter how much he did, it often felt like the world gave back nothing but obstacles. Bills piled up. Repairs on their old, creaky apartment were endless, and each day at the diner felt like a test of endurance, especially with Mr. Grayson breathing down his neck. But Aaron didn't complain. He didn't believe in wallowing in self-pity. Instead, he focused on the little joys, the smile of a satisfied customer, the camaraderie with his coworkers, the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. And when he first noticed the homeless woman outside the diner a few weeks ago, Aaron couldn't shake the image from his mind. She was always there, huddled in the same spot, her presence barely acknowledged by the throngs of people passing by. Sometimes, Aaron saw her rummaging through a trash can, and other times she simply sat, staring into the distance as if waiting for a miracle. Aaron had wanted to help her for weeks but had held back, fearing what Mr. Grayson might say or do if he caught him. Grayson had a strict policy against freeloaders, as he called them. The man's philosophy was clear. If you couldn't pay, you didn't belong. To Grayson, running a business was about profit, not charity. Aaron's co-workers often whispered about how cruel Grayson could be. There were stories of him firing employees on the spot for the smallest mistakes, spilling a drink, forgetting to greet a customer properly, or taking too long on a break. Aaron couldn't afford to lose this job, as much as he hated the way Grayson ran things. But something about the woman's presence gnawed at him. Maybe it was the way she clutched her blanket as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. Maybe it was the distant look in her eyes, a look that reminded Aaron of his own struggles, of the nights he'd gone without food or comfort. He couldn't just stand by anymore. That morning, when he finally decided to bring her a plate of food, Aaron felt a mix of fear and resolve. He knew the risks, but he also knew he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he turned away. As he handed her the plate and watched her eat, he felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For once, he wasn't just surviving, he was making a difference. Little did Aaron know, his act of kindness would soon set off a chain of events that would upend his life in ways he could never have imagined. The morning rush had come and gone, leaving Grayson's diner in a temporary lull. Aaron was clearing tables, his movements quick but careful. The encounter with the homeless woman was fresh in his mind. He had stepped outside just moments earlier to give her a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and a cup of hot coffee. Watching her eat, the gratitude in her tired eyes, had filled him with a rare sense of fulfillment. But now, as he returned to the diner, he felt the creeping anxiety of what might happen if Mr. Grayson found out. Aaron glanced toward the kitchen. Grayson was there, barking orders at the line cooks as he always did. The man's voice carried through the diner, sharp and impatient, like the crack of a whip. Aaron hoped Grayson hadn't noticed his brief absence or the missing plate of food. He busied himself with wiping down a table, trying to look as though he'd been there the whole time. "Hey, Aaron!" one of his coworkers, Jenna, called out. She was carrying a tray of drinks, her tone hushed but urgent. "Grayson's looking for you. Be careful." Aaron's stomach dropped. He nodded at Jenna and tried to steady his breathing. Maybe it was nothing, he told himself. Maybe Grayson just wanted to ask about the inventory or the schedule. But deep down, Aaron knew better. "Aaron!" Grayson's voice thundered from the kitchen. "In my office, now!" The entire diner seemed to pause. Conversations between customers grew quieter, and a few heads turned to see what the commotion was about. Aaron's co-workers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one said a word. The unspoken rule at Grayson's diner was clear. Don't get involved. Aaron set down the rag he'd been using to clean the table and made his way to the back, his heart pounding in his chest. He walked past the kitchen, where the line cooks avoided eye contact, and stepped into Grayson's cramped office. The door slammed shut behind him. Grayson stood behind his desk, his arms crossed over his chest. He was a stocky man with a perpetually sour expression, his face flushed from years of stress and bad temper. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You mind telling me where that plate of food went?" Grayson demanded, his voice cold and clipped. Aaron hesitated. He knew lying wouldn't help, but the truth could cost him everything. I gave it to someone," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Grayson's eyes narrowed. "Gave it to someone?" he repeated, his tone dripping with disdain. "Who? A paying customer I somehow missed? Or was it that woman outside?" Aaron swallowed hard. "She looked hungry. I couldn't just—" Don't finish that sentence, Grayson interrupted, his voice rising. He leaned forward, planting his hands on the desk. This is a business, Aaron, not a charity. Do you think I pay you to hand out free meals to every vagrant who parks themselves outside my diner? Aaron felt a spark of anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. She's a human being, he said quietly. She needed help. And you think that's your job now? Grayson shot back. You think it's your place to decide how I run my diner? Because let me tell you something, Aaron. You're replaceable. There are a dozen people out there who would kill for your job, and they wouldn't waste my time or my money on stunts like this. Aaron clenched his fists at his sides. He wanted to argue, to defend his actions, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Grayson wasn't the kind of man who listened to reason, especially when it came to money. I can dock your pay for the cost of that meal, Grayson continued, his voice laced with contempt. But you know what? That's not enough. You're fired, effective immediately. The words hit Aaron like a punch to the gut. Fired. Just like that. No discussion, no second chances. He stared at Grayson, trying to process what had just happened. You're serious? Aaron asked, his voice shaking slightly. Dead serious, Grayson replied. He straightened up, crossing his arms again. Pack up your things and get out. And don't think for a second that you can use me as a reference. Aaron stood there for a moment, frozen in place. He thought about his mother, about the bills piling up at home, about the dreams he'd scribbled into his notebook. All of it seemed to crumble in an instant. But then he thought about the woman outside, the look on her face when he handed her that plate of food. He thought about how many times he'd seen people walk past her without a second glance, as if she were invisible. He thought about how he would feel if he had done nothing. Aaron straightened his back and met Grayson's glare. If being kind to someone who needs help is a fireable offense, he said, then maybe I don't want to work here. Grayson scoffed. Good riddance. Aaron left the office without another word. As he walked through the kitchen and into the dining area, his co-workers avoided his gaze. Jenna gave him a small, apologetic smile, but there was nothing she could do. Aaron removed his apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. He didn't bother saying goodbye. As he stepped outside, the afternoon sun felt harsh on his skin. The woman was still there, sitting on the curb with the now empty plate and coffee cup beside her. She looked up at Aaron, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. What happened? She asked, her voice hoarse. Aaron forced a small smile. It's nothing, he said. Just a change of plans. He sat down beside her, ignoring the curious glances of passers-by. In that moment, Aaron felt a strange sense of peace. He had done the right thing, even if it had cost him everything. Little did he know, the consequences of his actions were far from over. Aaron sat on the curb outside Grayson's diner, the woman beside him silently nursing the last sips of coffee he had given her. The hustle and bustle of the city swirled around them, cars honking, footsteps echoing on the pavement, and snippets of conversations from hurried pedestrians. Yet, for Aaron, the world felt eerily still. The reality of his dismissal weighed on him heavily. His mind raced through the practicalities: rent, groceries, his mother's medical bills. But amid the chaos of his thoughts, there was an odd sense of clarity. He had done what he believed was right. The woman, now visibly more composed, turned to him. Her frail hands clutched the empty coffee cup as if it were a lifeline. You lost your job because of me, didn't you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aaron shook his head gently. It wasn't because of you, he replied. It was because of Mr. Grayson. He doesn't see people. He only sees numbers. The woman's tired eyes filled with guilt. I'm so sorry, she murmured. I didn't mean to cause you trouble, Her voice cracked. I've been on the streets for weeks. No one's even looked at me, let alone helped me. And then you... She trailed off, her voice breaking under the weight of her emotions. Aaron placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't apologize, he said firmly. Everyone deserves kindness. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're not worth it. The woman smiled faintly, her gratitude evident despite the sadness etched into her face. You're a good person, she said. The world needs more people like you. Before Aaron could respond, the distant growl of an engine interrupted their conversation. A sleek black SUV turned the corner and glided toward them, its glossy exterior reflecting the afternoon sun. The vehicle seemed out of place on the modest street. its imposing presence drawing curious glances from nearby pedestrians. The SUV came to a halt directly in front of the diner. Aaron and the woman exchanged puzzled looks as the driver's door opened. A tall, sharply dressed man stepped out, his tailored suit and polished shoes speaking of wealth and influence. He surveyed the diner with a critical eye before his gaze fell on Aaron and the woman. For a moment, the man stood still, his expression unreadable. Then, without hesitation, he walked toward them. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice deep and commanding. "Is everything all right here?" Aaron stood, instinctively positioning himself between the man and the woman. "We're fine," he replied cautiously. "Can I help you with something?" The man's eyes shifted to the woman. At first, there was no recognition, but as he looked closer, his expression softened, his composure breaking for just a moment. "Mom?" he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. The woman froze, her eyes widening in shock. "Daniel?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Aaron stepped back, his mind struggling to piece together what was happening. The man knelt beside the woman, his expensive suit forgotten as he reached out to her. "Mom, is it really you?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she nodded. "I didn't know how to find you," she said. "I didn't think you'd want to see me after everything." Daniel shook his head, his own eyes glistening. "Don't say that," he said firmly. "I've been looking for you everywhere. I thought I'd lost you forever." Aaron watched the reunion in stunned silence. He felt like an intruder in a moment so personal and raw, yet he couldn't look away. It was as if fate had orchestrated this encounter, drawing together lives that had been separated by hardship and misunderstanding. Daniel helped his mother to her feet, his arm wrapped protectively around her. "Let's get you somewhere safe," he said. "You need rest, food, and care." The woman hesitated, glancing at Aaron. "This young man," she said, her voice full of conviction. "He's the reason I'm still standing. He gave me food when no one else would, and he stood up for me even when it cost him his job." Daniel turned to Aaron, his sharp eyes assessing him. "Is that true?" he asked. Aaron nodded, unsure of what to say. "I just did what anyone would do," he said modestly. Daniel's lips curved into a faint smile. "Not everyone would," he said. "Most people would walk right past." For a moment, the three of them stood in silence. Then Daniel straightened, his demeanor shifting from personal to professional. "Come inside with me," he said to Aaron. "I have something to discuss with Mr. Grayson." Aaron hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said. "Mr. Grayson isn't exactly the understanding type." Daniel's smile widened slightly, though it carried a hint of steel. "Don't worry," he said. "I can be very persuasive." The three of them entered the diner, the bell above the door chiming softly. The lull from earlier had passed, and the restaurant was now filled with customers. Conversations paused as heads turned to take in the unexpected trio: Aaron, the homeless woman, and the sharply dressed man who exuded authority. Mr. Grayson emerged from the kitchen, his expression souring as soon as he saw Aaron. "I thought I told you to leave," he snapped. "What are you still doing here?" Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "I'm here to talk to you, Mr. Grayson," he said. "My name is Daniel Carter." Grayson's demeanor shifted immediately, his face pale as recognition dawned. "Mr. Carter," he stammered. I wasn't expecting you." Daniel's reputation clearly preceded him. Aaron watched as the normally abrasive Grayson struggled to compose himself, his arrogance replaced by nervous deference. Daniel gestured toward the woman. "This is my mother," he said, "and this young man," he added, motioning to Aaron, "is the reason she's alive and well today." Grayson blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I didn't know," he said finally. "That's right," Daniel said, his tone sharpening. "You didn't, and instead of showing gratitude, you fired him for an act of kindness." Grayson began to sputter excuses, but Daniel held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not interested in your justifications," he said. "I'm interested in solutions." Aaron stood quietly, his heart pounding as the confrontation unfolded. He had no idea what Daniel had planned, but the intensity in the man's voice made it clear that things were about to change. The tension in the diner was palpable. Every eye in the room was locked on the unfolding confrontation between Daniel and Mr. Grayson. Aaron stood to the side, unsure of what to expect, but acutely aware that the events of the next few minutes could alter his life in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. Daniel, still calm but radiating authority, gestured toward one of the empty booths near the window. "Why don't we sit down, Mr. Grayson?" he said. "This discussion will be better handled away from your patrons." Grayson hesitated, his face flushed and nervous, but he nodded. "Of course, Mr. Carter," he mumbled, leading the way to the booth. Daniel followed, and Aaron instinctively moved to stay behind, not wanting to overstep. But Daniel motioned for him to join them. "You too, Aaron," he said. "This involves you as much as anyone." Aaron swallowed hard and nodded, sliding into the booth opposite Mr. Grayson. Daniel remained standing, his commanding presence filling the room. He began speaking, his voice steady and clear, carrying the weight of a man used to being listened to. "Mr. Grayson, let me be blunt," Daniel said, placing his hands on the table and leaning forward slightly. "What happened here today was unacceptable. My mother sat outside your establishment for hours, starving and in need, and not a single person from your staff thought to help her. The only person who did, this young man, was punished for his kindness, fired. Tell me, do you consider that good business practice?" Grayson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Carter, I didn't know she was your mother. If I had known..." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "It shouldn't matter who she is," he interrupted. "Every person deserves dignity and compassion, regardless of their circumstances. Your actions today demonstrated not only a lack of humanity, but also poor judgment as a business owner." The diner had fallen silent, the usual clatter of plates and murmur of conversations replaced by the heavy weight of Daniel's words. Aaron felt a surge of vindication, but also a pang of nervousness. He had never seen anyone stand up to Mr. Grayson like this. Grayson cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "You're right, Mr. Carter," he said. "I made a mistake. I let my frustration get the better of me. It was wrong to fire Aaron. I'll reinstate him immediately." Daniel raised an eyebrow, his expression unimpressed. "You think that's enough?" he asked. "To reinstate him and go back to business as usual?" "No, Mr. Grayson, that won't do. Today's events have shown me that this diner needs a complete change. Of leadership, of values, of everything." Grayson's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "What do you mean?" he stammered. Daniel straightened, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a sleek black pen and a folded piece of paper. "I mean that I'm buying this establishment," he said, placing the paper on the table. "This is an offer to purchase your diner outright, effective immediately." The room erupted in murmurs. Aaron's jaw dropped. Mr. Grayson looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. "What?" he sputtered. "You can't just walk in here and—" Daniel cut him off with a sharp glance. "Oh, but I can, and I will. You see, Mr. Grayson, I'm not just a concerned son. I'm also a successful businessman with the means and the motivation to ensure that no one else suffers the way my mother did today. I've done my research. This diner is profitable, but barely. You're in over your head with the mortgage and overdue supplier payments, aren't you?" Grayson's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Daniel's assessment was spot on, and everyone in the room knew it. "I'm offering you a way out," Daniel continued. "A generous sum that will cover your debts and leave you with a tidy profit. Take it, and walk away with your dignity intact. Refuse, and I promise you, this business won't survive the week." Aaron glanced at Mr. Grayson, whose face was now ashen. He looked at the paper in front of him, his hands trembling as he unfolded it. His eyes darted over the figures written there, and Aaron saw a flicker of relief mixed with resignation. Grayson slumped back in the booth, defeated. "Fine," he muttered. "You have a deal." Daniel nodded curtly. "Smart choice," he said. He turned to Aaron, his expression softening. "Aaron, would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Aaron nodded, still too stunned to speak, and followed Daniel out onto the sidewalk. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves on the nearby trees. Daniel turned to face him, his hands in his pockets and a faint smile on his lips. "You're probably wondering why I went to all this trouble," Daniel said. Aaron nodded. "A little," he admitted. "I mean, I'm grateful, but why me?" Daniel's smile widened. "Because you remind me of myself," he said simply. "When I was younger, I didn't have much either. I worked long hours, struggled to make ends meet, and often felt invisible to the world. But one day, someone took a chance on me. They saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, and it changed my life." Aaron listened intently, the weight of Daniel's words sinking in. He realized that this man wasn't just wealthy and powerful, he was also deeply empathetic. "I see that same potential in you, Aaron," Daniel continued. "You have the courage to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. That's the kind of person I want running this diner." Aaron blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Running the diner?" he repeated. Daniel nodded. "Yes," he said. "As of today, this diner is yours to manage. I'll provide the resources and support you need to make it a success. But I trust you to lead it with the same kindness and integrity you showed today." Aaron's heart raced. He felt a mix of disbelief, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Thank you doesn't feel like enough." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Just promise me you'll pay it forward," he said. "Use this opportunity to help others, just like you helped my mother." Aaron nodded, his eyes shining with determination. "I promise," he said. As the two men stood outside the diner, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the street. Inside, the staff and customers buzzed with excitement, already sensing the changes to come. And for the first time in a long time, Aaron felt a deep sense of hope, a belief that better days were ahead. The sun was setting as Aaron walked back into the diner, the paperwork now officially signed, and Daniel's vision set into motion. The atmosphere inside had shifted dramatically. Whispers buzzed among the customers and staff, and for the first time, Aaron saw something new on their faces: hope. Aaron stood in the middle of the room, unsure of how to begin. He had just gone from being a fired waiter to the manager of the entire establishment in a matter of hours. It was overwhelming but also exhilarating. Daniel walked in behind him, his voice steady and encouraging. "Aaron, the first thing any great leader does is address their team. Let them know where you stand and where you want to go." Aaron swallowed hard and nodded. He turned to face the employees, servers, kitchen staff, and busboys, most of whom had worked alongside him for months. They were family in many ways, and he knew their struggles, their strengths, and their fears. Taking a deep breath, Aaron began. "I know today has been surprising, to say the least. I never imagined I'd be standing here like this, but I want you all to know something. This diner isn't just mine, it's ours. Together we're going to make it something we can all be proud of." The staff exchanged uncertain glances. One of the cooks, an older man named George who had been working at the diner for over a decade, stepped forward. "Aaron, we've always respected you, but running a diner, it's a lot different than waiting tables. Do you really think you can do it?" Aaron nodded. "I won't pretend to have all the answers, George, but I promise you this. I'll work just as hard as I always have, if not harder, and I'll listen to each of you. We'll figure this out together." The sincerity in Aaron's voice seemed to resonate. George nodded and stepped back, a small but meaningful show of support. Slowly, others began to nod as well, murmuring their agreement. Daniel smiled and clapped Aaron on the shoulder. "Well said. Now let's talk about the next steps." Over the next few days, the diner underwent a transformation. Aaron worked tirelessly alongside Daniel and his team to implement a series of changes aimed at revitalizing the business and creating a culture of kindness and inclusivity. The first order of business was to address the menu. Aaron knew the current offerings were outdated and uninspired. He organized a meeting with the kitchen staff to brainstorm ideas for new dishes. "I want this menu to reflect our community," he said. "Let's include recipes that people can connect with, comfort food, healthier options, and maybe even a few dishes that showcase the diverse cultures in our neighborhood." The team was hesitant at first, but Aaron's enthusiasm was infectious. They began sharing ideas, experimenting in the kitchen, and creating sample dishes for a tasting event. Aaron invited a few regular customers and local influencers to try the new menu, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Next, Aaron tackled the diner's appearance. The worn-out booths and faded decor had long been a sore point for the staff and patrons. With Daniel's financial backing, Aaron hired a local contractor to give the place a much-needed facelift. Fresh paint, new lighting, and modern furniture transformed the diner into a warm and inviting space. A mural depicting the neighborhood's history was painted on one of the walls, adding a personal touch that resonated with the community. But the most significant change came in the form of a new policy: a pay-it-forward board. Aaron installed a large chalkboard near the entrance, where customers could purchase meals in advance for anyone in need. It was a simple but powerful idea, inspired by his own act of kindness toward the homeless woman. Within days, the board was filled with colorful messages and meal credits, a testament to the generosity of the community. One evening, about a week after the transformation began, Aaron was standing behind the counter, reviewing the day's receipts. The diner was busier than it had been in years, and he could hardly believe the progress they'd made in such a short time. As he worked, a young woman approached the counter, holding her son's hand. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you the manager?" Aaron looked up and smiled. "Yes, how can I help you?" The woman hesitated, glancing at the Pay It Forward board. "I saw this on social media," she said. "I'm between jobs right now and money's tight. Would it be okay if we used one of the meals on the board?" Aaron's heart swelled. This was exactly why he'd implemented the policy. "Of course," he said warmly. "You're welcome here any time." He personally brought them their meals, taking a moment to sit with the young boy and ask about his favorite foods. The gratitude in their eyes was all the validation he needed. As the days turned into weeks, the diner became more than just a place to eat. It became a hub for the community. People from all walks of life came through the doors, drawn by the welcoming atmosphere and the chance to be part of something bigger than themselves. Aaron's leadership style earned him the respect of his staff and the admiration of his customers. He wasn't just their boss, he was their ally, their cheerleader, and sometimes their shoulder to lean on. He made it a point to celebrate every success, no matter how small, and to acknowledge the contributions of everyone on the team. One evening, as Aaron was closing up for the night, Daniel stopped by. He leaned against the counter, a satisfied smile on his face. "You've done an incredible job, Aaron," he said. "This diner has become something truly special." Aaron looked around the room, now empty but still glowing with the energy of the day. "I couldn't have done it without you, Daniel," he said. "You gave me this opportunity. All I did was try to live up to it." Daniel shook his head. "No, Aaron, you did more than that. You turned this place into a beacon of hope, and I have no doubt that you'll keep building on that." As Daniel left, Aaron stood in the quiet diner, reflecting on how much had changed since the day he was fired. The challenges had been immense, but the rewards were even greater. He had found a purpose, a community, and a future he could be proud of, and he knew that this was only the beginning. The diner was thriving. The Pay It Forward board had become a beacon of hope. The revamped menu was drawing in crowds, and Aaron was settling into his role as a leader. Yet, there was one person Aaron couldn't stop thinking about, the homeless woman he had fed that day. Her face and gratitude remained etched in his mind, a reminder of why he had taken the leap of faith to embrace this new chapter. Aaron often wondered what had happened to her after their brief encounter. He hadn't seen her since, but he hoped she was safe and well. Little did he know, a surprise was about to come knocking that would forever change his life. It was a sunny afternoon, and the diner was bustling with activity. Families filled the booths, laughter and the clinking of dishes creating a symphony of warmth and community. Aaron stood behind the counter, managing orders and chatting with regulars. Everything felt like it was finally falling into place. Just then, the sound of an engine caught his attention. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the diner, its glossy exterior reflecting the sunlight. The car was a stark contrast to the humble neighborhood, and it immediately turned heads. Aaron watched curiously as the driver stepped out. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 40s, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of wealth and influence. His movements were deliberate, and his expression was unreadable. The man walked toward the diner with an air of purpose, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. The doorbell jingled as he stepped inside, and the entire diner seemed to pause. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to the mysterious visitor. Aaron instinctively straightened his posture, unsure of what to expect. The man scanned the room until his eyes landed on Aaron. His gaze softened, and he approached the counter, extending a hand. "You must be Aaron," he said, his voice deep and calm. Aaron shook his hand, his curiosity growing. "That's me. Can I help you?" The man offered a small smile. "I believe it's time for me to help you." Aaron furrowed his brow, confused. "I'm sorry, but I don't think we've met." The man nodded. "You're right. We haven't. But you helped someone very dear to me. A gesture of kindness that I can never repay." Aaron's heart skipped a beat. "Could it be?" "My name is Robert," the man continued. "The woman you fed that day. The The one who was sitting outside starving. She's my mother. Aaron's eyes widened in disbelief. Your mother? Robert nodded, his expression filled with emotion. Her name is Margaret. She went through a rough patch, one that I didn't know about until recently. She was too proud to ask for help, even from her own family. When you gave her that meal, you did more than just feed her. You gave her hope. And when I finally found her and heard about what you did, I knew I had to meet the man who showed her such compassion. Aaron was speechless. He remembered Margaret vividly, the frailty in her voice, the gratitude in her eyes. How is she now? He managed to ask. She's doing much better, Robert said. I've brought her home, and we're working on rebuilding our relationship. She talks about you often, Aaron. She says you were the first person to treat her with dignity in a long time. Aaron felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't done it for recognition or thanks. He had simply acted on instinct, driven by empathy. But hearing how much it had meant to Margaret was overwhelming. Thank you for telling me, Aaron said quietly. I'm glad she's safe and with her family. Robert's smile widened. That's not all. I came here today because I want to honor your kindness in a way that truly reflects its impact. Before Aaron could respond, Robert gestured toward the window, where a moving truck had just pulled up. Workers began unloading boxes filled with brand new kitchen equipment, furniture, and decor. What's going on? Aaron asked, bewildered. I'm buying this diner, Robert said, his tone matter-of-fact, and I'm making you its owner. Aaron's jaw dropped. What? No, I can't. Robert raised a hand to stop him. You can, and you will. This isn't charity, Aaron. It's an investment in someone who has proven to be a leader and a force for good. You've already turned this place into a sanctuary for the community. Now, I want you to have the resources to take it even further. The diner erupted into applause as the news spread. Customers and staff cheered, their faces lit with joy. Aaron stood frozen, his mind racing to process what was happening. But I don't know how to run a business, he stammered. Robert chuckled. You're already doing it, Aaron, and I'll be here to guide you. Think of me as your silent partner, someone who believes in your vision and wants to see it thrive. Aaron felt tears welling up in his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Robert said simply. Say yes to a future where your kindness is the foundation for something incredible. Aaron looked around the diner, at the people who had become his family and the community that had rallied around him. He thought about Margaret and how one simple meal had set all of this in motion. Finally, he met Robert's gaze and nodded. Yes, I'll do it. The room erupted into cheers once again, and Aaron found himself swept up in a whirlwind of emotions. He was no longer just a waiter or even a manager. He was the owner of a place that had become a symbol of hope and compassion. As the workers continued to unload the new equipment, Aaron and Robert sat down to discuss plans for the diner's future. They talked about expanding the Pay It Forward initiative, hosting community events, and even partnering with local charities to support those in need. For the first time in his life, Aaron felt like he had a purpose, a chance to make a real difference, and it all started with a simple act of kindness that had rippled out to change not only his life, but the lives of countless others. That evening, as Aaron locked up the diner and walked home under the glow of the streetlights, he couldn't help but smile. The journey had been unexpected and challenging, but it had led him to a place of hope, gratitude, and endless possibilities, and he knew that this was only the beginning. The days that followed the announcement of Aaron's new role as the owner of the diner were a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Robert stayed involved, helping Aaron navigate the transition from employee to business owner. The new kitchen equipment and furniture were installed, transforming the diner into a vibrant and welcoming space. The interior, once humble and worn, now gleamed with fresh paint, modern lighting, and a touch of rustic charm that retained the diner's comforting ambiance. Aaron threw himself into his new responsibilities with determination and enthusiasm. It wasn't just about managing the diner, it was about shaping it into a space that could serve as a cornerstone of the community. He wanted every customer who walked through the doors to feel seen, valued, and supported. The Pay It Forward board, which had become the heart of the diner, was expanded and given a prominent place near the entrance. Aaron added a chalkboard above it with the words, "Kindness starts here." One of Aaron's first initiatives as the new owner was hosting a grand reopening event. Flyers were distributed around the neighborhood, and local businesses were invited to participate. Aaron and his staff worked tirelessly to prepare, ensuring the menu was perfect, the staff was trained, and the space was spotless. On the day of the event, the diner buzzed with energy. A live jazz band played near the entrance, and the aroma of freshly baked pies wafted through the air. Families, friends, and curious newcomers filled the booths and tables, creating a lively and joyful atmosphere. Aaron moved from table to table, greeting guests and listening to their stories. Many shared how the diner had become a second home for them, a place where they could find comfort and connection. Aaron felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. This was no longer just a business. It was a beacon of hope. As the reopening event unfolded, Aaron noticed a group of children crowding around the Pay It Forward board. They marveled at the colorful notes pinned to it, each one representing an act of kindness. Aaron joined them, crouching down to explain how it worked. "Every note you see here is a gift from someone who wanted to help a stranger," he said. "When someone comes in and can't afford a meal, they can take a note and use it to get something to eat." One of the children, a boy with wide eyes and a toothy grin, pointed to a note that said, "For someone who needs a warm cup of coffee on a cold day." He turned to Aaron and asked, "Can I do one too?" Aaron smiled. "Of course, kindness doesn't have an age limit." The boy wrote his note with careful concentration, pinning it to the board with pride. Aaron felt his heart swell. This was what he had envisioned, a community united by the simple but powerful act of caring for one another. As the weeks went by, the diner became more than just a place to eat. Aaron introduced community-focused programs, like free meals for veterans every Friday and monthly neighbor nights, where local musicians, poets, and storytellers could showcase their talents. The diner also partnered with a nearby shelter, providing meals and hosting job fairs to help those in need find employment opportunities. One day, Aaron received a call from Margaret, Robert's mother, and the woman whose hunger had started it all. She wanted to visit the diner to see how it had transformed. Aaron eagerly invited her, setting aside a quiet corner booth for her arrival. When Margaret walked in, her eyes lit up. The once modest diner now exuded warmth and vitality. Aaron greeted her with a hug, and they sat down to catch up. "This place is incredible," Margaret said, her voice filled with awe. "You've done so much." Aaron shook his head. "None of this would have been possible without you. Your story reminded me of why kindness matters." Margaret smiled. "You didn't just give me a meal that day, Aaron. You gave me dignity. And now, you're giving that to so many others." They talked for hours, sharing stories and ideas. Margaret even offered to volunteer at the diner, helping Aaron with the Pay It Forward initiative. She became a regular presence, her warmth and resilience inspiring everyone she met. One of the most significant moments in the diner's new chapter came when Aaron decided to honor his late father, who had instilled in him the values of compassion and hard work. He renamed the diner Henry's Haven, a tribute to his father's memory and a reflection of the safe space the diner had become. The unveiling of the new name was marked by a community celebration. A local artist painted a mural on the diner's exterior, depicting a tree with sprawling roots and branches covered in colorful leaves, each one representing a story of kindness. At the base of the tree, the words Henry's Haven were inscribed, along with the diner's new motto, "Where every meal feeds the soul." The mural became a symbol of hope, drawing people from all over the city. Customers would stop to take pictures, often leaving their own stories of kindness on small cards that Aaron displayed in the diner. It was a testament to the ripple effect of Aaron's journey, how one act of compassion could spark a movement. As Henry's Haven flourished, Aaron found himself reflecting on how far he had come. He had started as a waiter, struggling to make ends meet and questioning his place in the world. Now he was the owner of a thriving business, a leader in his community, and a living example of how kindness could transform lives. One evening, as the sun set and the diner's neon sign cast a warm glow over the street, Aaron stood by the window, watching the world go by. Customers laughed and chatted at their tables. The Pay It Forward board was filled with notes, and the mural outside shimmered in the fading light. Aaron felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been unexpected and challenging, but it had led him to a place where he could make a real difference. He had learned that kindness wasn't just an act, it was a way of life, and he was ready to keep building a future where compassion could thrive, one meal at a time. As the days turned into months, the impact of Henry's Haven extended far beyond the walls of the diner. The once quiet street where the restaurant stood became a bustling hub of activity. The community began to view the diner not only as a place to eat, but as a symbol of hope, a beacon of compassion that inspired others to pay it forward in their own ways. One evening, Aaron received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, the penmanship careful and deliberate. The sender had enclosed a newspaper clipping about the diner, highlighting its transformative journey under Aaron's leadership. The letter was from a man named Peter, a teacher at a local high school, who had read about the diner's Pay It Forward board and wanted to involve his students in the movement. Peter wrote about his students, many of whom faced challenges at home and in their communities. He explained how they had been learning about the power of small acts of kindness and wanted to visit Henry's Haven to experience it firsthand. Aaron was moved by the letter and immediately called Peter, inviting the students to the diner for a special event. The day of the visit was one Aaron would never forget. The students arrived in groups, their excitement palpable as they stepped inside. Margaret, who had become a familiar face at the diner, greeted them warmly, sharing her own story of how Aaron's kindness had changed her life. Aaron had prepared a small presentation, complete with stories from the Pay It Forward board and examples of how customers had used the initiative to help others. One story in particular resonated with the students, a note from a customer who had used the board to provide meals for an entire family displaced by a house fire. That family, in turn, had started volunteering at a local shelter, spreading the kindness they had received. The students were inspired. They spent the afternoon writing their own notes for the board, many of them using their allowances or savings to contribute. Some wrote simple messages like, "For someone who needs a hot drink on a cold day," while others shared more personal words of encouragement. By the end of the day, the board was overflowing with colorful notes, each one a testament to the power of giving. The students' visit sparked a chain reaction. They returned to their school, sharing their experience with classmates and teachers. Soon, other schools reached out to Aaron, wanting to bring their students to Henry's Haven to learn about kindness and community. Aaron welcomed them all, organizing workshops and discussions about how small acts could create big changes. The diner became a meeting place for people from all walks of life: students, teachers, volunteers, and even local officials. Aaron's efforts caught the attention of a local nonprofit organization, which partnered with Henry's Haven to launch a mentorship program for young people. The program provided job training and life skills, with the diner serving as a hands-on learning environment. Aaron took pride in mentoring the participants. Many of them reminded him of himself when he first started as a waiter, eager, hardworking, but unsure of their potential. He taught them not just about the restaurant business, but also about the values that had guided him: empathy, integrity, and perseverance. One of the first participants in the program, a young man named Leo, stood out for his determination. Leo had faced significant obstacles in his life, but he approached every task at the diner with a positive attitude. Over time, Aaron saw Leo grow in confidence and skill. When the mentorship program ended, Aaron offered Leo a full-time position at Henry's Haven, a moment that filled both of them with pride. As the diner's reputation grew, so did the stories of its impact. Local news outlets ran features on the diner, and word spread through social media. Customers from neighboring towns began visiting, drawn by the stories of kindness and the chance to contribute to the Pay It Forward board. One day, a customer walked in with a camera crew in tow. She introduced herself as a producer for a national television show that highlighted community heroes. She had heard about Henry's Haven and wanted to feature Aaron's journey and the diner's mission on the program. At first, Aaron hesitated. He wasn't sure he wanted the attention, but Margaret encouraged him. "This isn't about fame," she said gently. "It's about showing people what's possible when we choose kindness." The segment aired a few weeks later, and the response was overwhelming. Letters and donations poured in from across the country, with people sharing their own stories of kindness and asking how they could support the diner's efforts. Aaron used the funds to expand the mentorship program and enhance the diner's outreach initiatives, ensuring that the ripple effect of kindness continued to grow. One particularly busy afternoon, Aaron noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Robert, standing near the Pay It Forward board reading the notes with a thoughtful expression. Aaron's heart swelled with gratitude as he approached his friend. I wasn't sure if you'd ever come back, Aaron said with a smile. Robert turned, his eyes warm. I wanted to see it for myself, the community you've built here. It's incredible, Aaron. You've turned this place into something truly special. Aaron nodded, his voice thick with emotion. None of this would have been possible without you, Robert. You believed in me when no one else did. Robert shrugged modestly. I just gave you the tools. You're the one who built it. They spent the afternoon catching up, reminiscing about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Robert shared updates about his own life, and Aaron introduced him to the staff, many of whom had been touched by the diner's mission. By the time Robert left, Aaron felt a renewed sense of purpose, reminded of the extraordinary power of connection and gratitude. As the months turned into years, Henry's Haven continued to thrive. The diner wasn't just a business, it was a movement, a testament to the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness could change lives. Aaron often reflected on the moment that had started it all, the simple decision to feed a hungry woman. That one act had set off a chain of events that had transformed not just his life, but the lives of countless others. Every day, Aaron was reminded of the words written on the chalkboard above the Pay It Forward board. Kindness starts here. And every day he saw those words come to life, one act of compassion at a time. Years passed, and Henry's Haven evolved into more than just a diner. It became a landmark, a testament to how kindness could transform not only lives but entire communities. The diner became a meeting point for volunteers, activists, and dreamers, all inspired by Aaron's journey and the impact of his choices. Aaron's leadership had created a culture of compassion, one that extended far beyond the restaurant's walls. As his team grew, so did the initiatives that Henry's Haven supported. The mentorship program expanded into a full-fledged community training center, offering courses in job readiness, financial literacy, and even emotional well-being. Many graduates of the program went on to start businesses, contribute to the community, and mentor others, perpetuating the cycle of giving. One bright morning, Aaron stood outside the diner, marveling at the crowd gathered for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. After years of planning and saving, Henry's Haven was unveiling its new expansion, a community kitchen designed to provide free meals for those in need. The idea had been inspired by Margaret, who had become a vital part of the diner's team and a trusted advisor to Aaron. Margaret had suggested the community kitchen, after observing how the Pay It Forward board had touched so many lives. There's always someone who needs a little more, she had said. Let's make sure they never leave hungry. The kitchen was named after Margaret, a surprise that left her speechless when the sign was unveiled. Margaret's Kitchen, serving kindness daily, read the plaque, and Margaret's eyes glistened with tears as the crowd erupted in applause. The ceremony was attended by local officials, nonprofit leaders, and members of the community who had been impacted by Henry's Haven. Even Robert made a rare appearance, standing proudly beside Aaron as the ribbon was cut. You've built something extraordinary here, Robert said, his voice filled with pride. It's a legacy. Aaron couldn't help but smile. It's our legacy, he replied. None of this would have happened without you. Over time, Henry's Haven became a story told in classrooms, a case study in business courses, and an inspiration for community organizers across the country. Journalists frequently visited the diner, writing articles about its unique approach to kindness and its far-reaching impact. Despite the attention, Aaron remained grounded, always attributing the success to the community and the incredible team that worked beside him. One day, Aaron received an invitation to speak at a national conference on social entrepreneurship. At first, he was hesitant. Public speaking wasn't his strength, and he worried that his story might not resonate with such a large audience. But Margaret and Robert encouraged him, reminding him of the power of his journey. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of attendees, Aaron shared the story of how a simple act of kindness had changed his life. He spoke about feeding Margaret, losing his job, and the unexpected arrival of Robert in the SUV that had altered his destiny. As he recounted the challenges and triumphs that followed, the audience listened intently, many of them moved to tears. Aaron ended his speech with a simple but powerful message. Kindness isn't just an action, it's a choice, one we make every day. When we choose kindness, we open the door to possibilities we can't even imagine. And sometimes all it takes is one small act to create a ripple that touches countless lives. The crowd erupted into applause, giving Aaron a standing ovation. As he stepped off the stage, several attendees approached him, eager to learn more about Henry's Haven and how they could replicate its model in their own communities. Back at the diner, life continued as it always had, busy, vibrant, and filled with moments of connection. One afternoon, Aaron was approached by a young woman who had recently started volunteering at Margaret's kitchen. She introduced herself as Rachel and shared how the diner had inspired her to pursue a degree in social work. "My family came here when we were struggling," Rachel explained. "The meals we received from the Pay It Forward board kept us going. I've always wanted to give back, and this place feels like the perfect way to start." Aaron was touched by her story and encouraged her to pursue her dreams. "You've already started making a difference," he said, "and wherever your journey takes you, remember that kindness is your greatest strength." Rachel's story was just one of many that Aaron heard over the years. Each one reinforced his belief that Henry's Haven was more than a restaurant. It was a catalyst for change, a reminder of the goodness that could be found in even the most challenging circumstances. As Aaron's hair turned gray and the lines on his face deepened, he began to think about the future of Henry's Haven. He knew that one day he would need to step back and let someone else lead, but he wasn't worried. The team he had built was strong, and the values that guided the diner were deeply ingrained in its culture. Aaron eventually decided to establish a foundation in the diner's name, ensuring that its mission would continue for generations to come. The Henry's Haven Foundation focused on supporting community kitchens, mentorship programs, and initiatives that promoted kindness and compassion. Aaron's first act as the foundation's director was to ensure that Margaret's Kitchen could serve more people by adding mobile units to reach underserved areas. When Aaron announced his retirement, the community came together to celebrate his contributions. A large banner was hung outside the diner, reading, "Thank you, Aaron, for teaching us that kindness changes everything." The diner was filled with laughter, stories, and gratitude as customers, staff, and friends shared their memories of Aaron's time at Henry's Haven. Aaron's last day at the diner was bittersweet. He walked through the restaurant one final time, taking in the familiar sounds of clinking dishes and cheerful chatter. As he stepped outside, he paused to look at the sign above the door, the one that had been there since the diner first opened, "Henry's Haven, where kindness starts." He smiled, knowing that the message would remain long after he was gone. The diner, the community, and the countless lives it had touched were all part of a legacy built on the simplest and most profound principle of all, kindness. And as Aaron walked away, he felt at peace, knowing that Henry's Haven would continue to inspire, uplift, and transform lives, just as it had transformed his. Retirement brought Aaron a peace he hadn't experienced in decades. Yet, as fulfilling as his work at Henry's Haven had been, stepping away from the diner felt like closing a beloved chapter of his life. Now he was ready to explore a world beyond the bustling restaurant that had defined him for so long. For the first few weeks, Aaron allowed himself to rest. He took long walks through the park near his home, read books he had been putting off for years, and indulged in his favorite pastime, gardening. His backyard, once neglected, slowly transformed into a serene oasis filled with vibrant flowers, lush greenery, and a small vegetable patch. It became his sanctuary, a place where he could reflect on his journey and dream about the future. But Aaron wasn't the type to stay idle for long. The same energy that had driven him to build Henry's Haven began to stir again. He realized he had more to give, not just to his community, but to the world at large. One sunny afternoon, Aaron received a call from Rachel, the young volunteer he had encouraged to pursue social work. She had graduated with honors and was now working for a nonprofit organization focused on housing insecurity. "Aaron," she said, her voice filled with excitement, "we're launching a new initiative to help families transition from shelters to permanent housing. I thought of you immediately. Would you be interested in joining our advisory board?" Aaron hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. He had always believed that everyone deserved a chance at stability and dignity, and this initiative aligned perfectly with his values. He attended his first meeting the following week, bringing with him years of experience and a heart full of ideas. At the meeting, Aaron shared stories from his time at Henry's Haven, emphasizing the importance of creating spaces where people felt seen and valued. His insights resonated deeply with the team, and his suggestions helped shape the program's direction. The initiative, aptly named the Haven Project, provided not only housing but also job training, mental health support, and mentorship programs. Aaron's involvement with the Haven Project reignited his passion for community work. He began traveling to different cities, speaking at events, and sharing the story of Henry's Haven. His speeches inspired other organizations to adopt similar models of compassion-driven leadership, creating ripples of change far beyond his hometown. One evening, Aaron received an unexpected visitor. Margaret arrived at his doorstep, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. "I thought your garden could use a little more sunshine," she said with a warm smile. Aaron invited her in, and they sat in the living room, reminiscing about their journey together. Margaret had remained an integral part of Henry's Haven even after Aaron's retirement, ensuring that the diner stayed true to its mission. She shared updates about the team, the community kitchen, and the countless lives the diner continued to touch. "Do you ever miss it?" Margaret asked, her voice gentle. "Every day," Aaron admitted. "But I know it's in good hands, and honestly, it's exciting to see what's next." Margaret nodded. "You've always been good at looking forward. That's what makes you a leader." They talked late into the night, their conversation flowing effortlessly. By the time Margaret left, Aaron felt a renewed sense of purpose. A few weeks later, Aaron received an invitation from a local university. They were launching a program on social entrepreneurship and wanted him to be a guest lecturer. Nervous but honored, Aaron accepted. Standing in front of a lecture hall filled with eager students, he shared the story of Henry's Haven, focusing on the principles of empathy, resilience, and leadership. The students were captivated, asking thoughtful questions and taking notes as Aaron spoke. One student approached him after the lecture saying, "Your story has changed how I think about business. It's not just about profit, it's about people." Aaron left the university feeling hopeful for the future. The next generation, he realized, was filled with potential to create a kinder, more compassionate world. Meanwhile, the Haven Project flourished. Thanks in part to Aaron's guidance, it expanded to multiple cities, helping thousands of families rebuild their lives. Aaron traveled to see the impact firsthand, meeting people who had been given a second chance through the program. During one visit, he met a young mother named Carla, who had been living in her car with her 2 children before finding refuge through the Haven Project. With their support, Carla had secured a job, enrolled her children in school, and moved into her own apartment. She thanked Aaron profusely, tears in her eyes. "It wasn't just me," Aaron said, his voice steady. "It was a community of people who believed in you." Carla smiled. "You gave me hope when I had none. That's something I'll never forget." Moments like these reminded Aaron why he had dedicated his life to helping others. The work was never about recognition. It was about creating opportunities for people to thrive. As the years passed, Aaron continued to find ways to contribute. He started writing a memoir, documenting his journey from a struggling waiter to the owner of Henry's Haven and beyond. The book, titled "A Plate of Kindness: How One Meal Can Change a Life," became a bestseller, inspiring readers worldwide. Aaron also established a scholarship fund for aspiring social entrepreneurs, ensuring that future leaders had the resources to turn their dreams into reality. The first recipient, a bright young woman named Maya, reached out to thank him personally. She shared her vision of starting a mobile clinic for underserved communities, and Aaron couldn't have been prouder. One day, as Aaron tended to his garden, he received a call from Robert. The two had remained close, often meeting for coffee or exchanging updates. "Aaron," Robert said, "we're hosting a special anniversary event at Henry's Haven. It wouldn't be the same without you." Aaron attended the event, walking into the diner to a wave of applause. The room was filled with familiar faces, former customers, employees, and community members whose lives had been touched by the diner. As Aaron looked around, he realized the true extent of the legacy he had built. When it was his turn to speak, Aaron kept it simple. "This place started with a meal, a moment of kindness that grew into something bigger than I ever imagined. But the truth is, I didn't do this alone. Every person in this room contributed to what Henry's Haven has become. This isn't just my legacy, it's ours." The crowd erupted into cheers, and Aaron felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had started with so little, yet his journey had led to so much. As Aaron sat in the diner that evening, surrounded by friends and family, he reflected on his life. It wasn't the accolades or the achievements that mattered most. It was the connections, the lives he had touched, and the kindness that had come full circle. Aaron had learned that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion could create the biggest changes, and in that moment, he felt at peace, knowing that his story would continue to inspire long after he was gone. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It's in the comments below. It's in the comments below. It's in the